So this session, artificial intelligence and quantum, how can the EU get the best out of transformative technologies? We have a great panel in front of you, all sitting here, which is great. Jerry Sheehan, Director for Science, Technology and Innovation at the OECD. You're very welcome. We have Areya Ibarzabal, Chief Growth Officer at Multiverse Computing. My daughters would love the sound of that. A leading AI model compression and quantum software company. Also very welcome. Welcome also to Anne Mettler, former Director General of the European Political and Strategy Centre, obviously a former chair of ESPAS and a very strong supporter for a number of years, and more recently Vice President Europe of Breakthrough Energy. And finally we have Ajay Jakar, Visiting Fellow at the Department of Engineering Science at the University of Oxford, and Course Director for Artificial Intelligence. And last but not least, Pavel Svepoda, Senior Fellow at the Centre for Future Generation and the European Policy Centre, and Co-Director of the Brussels Economic Security Forum. And Pavel will be our moderator. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Great, thank you so much. It's great to be back at ESPAS with an impressive group of speakers, including my fabulous former boss and former chair of ESPAS, Anne Mettler. So AI and quantum emerging technologies, they are everything, everywhere, all the time. And what I would propose that we discuss today in this panel is what are the credible areas of aspiration for Europe, but set against a good dose of realism and pushing back against delusion as well. So I think there are some options for Europe, gladly. Investing in sort of US-style AI involution doesn't seem to be one of them for the simple reason that it just takes an incredible amount of money, right? $400 billion dollars invested annually in the digital infrastructure in the US. It doesn't seem to me that there is that type of funding available in Europe, given also a few other objectives that we need to cater for, to put it mildly. Then the second option is we can try to build a European technology stack with some modular, open source, sovereign solutions. It's not going to be the same, but maybe it can do the job and can reduce our dependencies. And the third option, which is the underlying one, is to really focus on diffusion of AI, namely make the best out of AI application in the different fields. So that's what I would like to ask the panelists about today, starting with Jerry. And AI is very much at the center of what OECD does at the moment, AI principles, the global partnership on AI, and so on, and the AI observatory, obviously. But when you work with governments, what I'm curious about is how much emphasis do you put on identifying these different opportunities that member states have with respect to AI, and how much do you focus on risk reduction, because obviously AI brings both lots of promise but also lots of risk.
All right, well, thank you. And I think, okay, there we go. So let me say thank you, and maybe my answer to your question in general is everything, everywhere, all of the above, right? Because I think one of the things we're trying to do in our work at OECD is take a holistic approach to how you have to advance on AI, and that does mean addressing some of the risks, safety issues, and concerns, as well as taking the needed actions to be able to actually to achieve the benefits and the opportunities that AI offers us for our economy, for healthcare, for education, all across our societies. And I think maybe the three pillars that we're working on now, one is continued work on ensuring that we're moving AI forward in a human-centric, values-based way. And this is building on the OECD AI principles and recommendation that you mentioned, right? So we did update those just about a year and a half ago, reflecting the fact that a lot had happened since they were introduced in 2019, generative AI, agentic AI, and we've been trying to take a forward-looking approach to what is coming next. I think one of the opportunities we see there is moving from the principles. One is expanding them. I mean, certainly we have the European Union countries engaged. We've got the OECD countries engaged. But we're trying to take those principles and use those as the foundational approach to AI in a much broader swath of countries. We now have close to 50 countries who've adhered to the OECD recommendations. And you mentioned the Global Partnership on AI, which is something we integrated OECD work and the pre-existing GPAE, Global Partnership, also just about a year and a few months ago, as a way to extend the ambition around the adoption of the AI principles. So now we're at 49 countries looking for ways to increase the other number of countries that will participate in this. But the second step and the second component is moving from those high-level principles into, from a policy-making point of view, policy practice. So how do we take the ambitions around accountability, transparency, human-centric and values-based approaches and put those into policy practice? And you mentioned one of the tools that we've developed to help countries do that, help regions like the European Union to do that as well, is through our OECD Observatory, now come the OECD Navigator, where we've been monitoring what's happening now across more than 70 different jurisdictions in terms of national strategies for AI, legislative initiatives, policy initiatives that focus on trying to get more economic impact out of AI, focus on applications of AI in areas like healthcare, education, agriculture, and food production, and so forth. And we're now building on top of that Navigator a toolkit. And the toolkit is really there to help policymakers navigate their way from principles to practice by looking at what are some of the good and emerging practices that we see across this expanding pool of countries we're working with. We're trying to ensure that this works, coming back to issues of inclusivity, not just for the OECD countries, but it works equally well for developing and emerging economies. So we're spending quite a bit of time now in a series of regional co-creation workshops. We've been in Southeast Asia, we're going to Africa, we'll be in Latin America and in the MENA region in coming months to try to better understand needs on the ground, different challenges, resource implications, and again, trying to understand where countries want to go, what their ambitions are with AI. And we'll use that to flesh out, if you will, the toolkit that will sit on top of the observatory. So let's go from policy into practice. The third has been, and maybe has two pillars to it, is trying to ensure we get the economic and societal benefits. So despite the fact that AI in policy circles is everything, everywhere, every how, when we look across the business sector, we see that adoption is still quite limited. Most recent data that we have looking across OECD countries says about of firms with 10 or more employees, only about 14, less than 15% have systematically adopted AI. And of course, they're still big if we look at trying to have more inclusive and diffuse AI across our economies, it's still heavily concentrated. It's in the ICT sector, which is kind of where AI emerged from, and it's much more heavily used in large firms than small firms. Difference of about 40% versus about 12%, 12 or 13%. And that's persistent across regions of the world. So we know if we want to see more inclusive AI, we want to see the economic benefits of AI, we need to move toward how do we encourage adoption of AI across SMEs, which means looking at some of the skill needs, some of the financial barriers, some of the other assets that you need to have in place to make use of good AI. And the second piece that we're doing, in fact, we just published some work on this for the European Union, was looking at what does it take to deploy AI in particular sectors. We've looked at mobility, healthcare, food and agriculture, and in manufacturing, and trying to understand where the opportunities are, where the European Union, and through work of the European Commission and other national level programs, are making good on the AI commitments that were put in place, and where we need to try to address specificities. The differences between privacy issues in healthcare and food production are dramatic. The needs for good access to high quality data in these different sectors to train AI systems and use them is also quite different. So we're trying to map out those series of differences to help deploy AI in effective ways across sectors.
Great, brilliant. We will come back to that issue of adoption momentarily, but I want to go to Anne because Anne has worked in the field of energy for a number of years now, and just yesterday we had the World Energy Outlook coming out from the International Energy Agency, speaking about breakneck demand growth for data centers and AI. So the IEA expects $580 billion US dollar investment annually in data centers, so a staggering amount. They also announced the age of electricity to be there, interestingly, 146 years after Edison's discovery of the light bulb. What do you think we should make out of it with respect to Europe's prospects, Anne?
It's a great question. Thank you. And obviously great to be back at ESPAS. So I think the first thing I want to point out, also sort of looking back at my time as the chair of ESPAS and everything that I learned during my time at the European Commission, it's very important not to look at technologies in isolation, which we tend to do because this is how departments are structured. So we need to really have a leadership in technology as a policy priority. Why? Because, and we learned this, Pavel, when we were we were here at the Commission. The world is basically in a competition for technology supremacy. And I use the word supremacy very purposefully because there will be a winner and there will be a loser. And I think what defined technology previously is that almost without exception, democracies were always in the leadership when it came to technology. And this has very much changed now. The technology frontier has moved in a very short period of time to China. I think we're all familiar with the critical technology tracker from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. China is now leading in 57 out of 64 critical technologies. That's a watershed. There are 3 technologies where I think it's not yet clear who will emerge the winner. One is AI. The other one is quantum, of course, and the third one is in chips / semiconductors. So, but you heard the other day, and this aspect of energy, which the Europeans have woken up to actually very recently, one needs to say, is really now becoming the decisive factor. You may have heard that just the other day, Jensen Huang, who is the CEO of NVIDIA, predicted that basically China will win the AI race, not because of computing power, but because of their energy supremacy, right? So this is a real problem in the United States. The US has cannot meet this demand, an explosion really of electricity demand. It has a very old energy infrastructure, has a very poor power grid. No one ever thought of this as being an issue in the digital economy, but this goes back to what I said earlier, is why it's so important that we don't look at these issues in isolation, right? So, and that brings me then to your question really about Europe. So Europe has very purposefully pursued a policy of scarcity, both when it comes to data, which is of course the fuel for AI, where we have made it almost impossible to work with data thanks to the GDPR. And secondly, also in energy, we have purposefully made energy scarce and expensive. And that's, of course, now standing in the way of leadership in AI. And let me say, I think we had a profound lack of foresight here because we basically didn't see that data was the stepping stone to artificial intelligence. And Pavel, you will remember when we were at the Commission and people said, oh, we want to be leaders in AI, not knowing that basically it's really the large volume of data and the aggregation of large volumes of data that is necessary. Where does the intelligence come from? It comes from data. But we had basically designed a regime which made it very, very difficult to work with data. You couldn't repurpose data. You know, it was a very strict regulatory approach. We also didn't see that basically AI would depend on abundant and affordable energy, which of course we don't have, right? So we didn't see all of this, and even worse, we designed these policies which are now standing in the way to AI leadership. So I think what is important here is in foresight, this is the job of foresight, is to think of unintended consequences. we, of course, wanted all the right things and the nice things, Jerry, that you're talking about. You know, the ethical AI and all the, you know, we anticipated all the risks. But we didn't anticipate just how painful it was going to be a loser in AI and to not be at the technology frontier, right? So unintended consequences. That's really bread and butter business for people who do strategic foresight. I won't say more about the GDPR. I won't say more about the ETS. But as I said, these are our policies, and I think it's time that we sort of have a very honest discussion about these issues. Just to say on energy, of course, it's important to remember that basically, in oil, we're paying 2 to 3 times what, let's say, competitors in the United States are paying. For natural gas, up to 4 times. Plus, we are subject to all the volatility of the price in natural gas. So that makes it really difficult, right, to build these data centers here. We don't have the abundant and cheap energy that is needed. You may have also heard that the Chinese recently said, basically, that they're going to make energy available for free to AI companies in China. Who can compete with that, right? So it's a very, very critical point that we need to think about. So coming back to strategic foresight, it is very important not just to have the foresight, but to also have sort of moments when you check in and say, did what we thought was going to happen, did that actually happen? And to have a very serious and honest discourse around that. And I don't think we have that built into the system. A lot of our assumptions have not panned out. And so we really need to have the honesty that is required, as well as sort of KPIs to begin with. I mean, oftentimes the public sector doesn't have enough, we don't have enough KPIs for the private sector, for the public sector. We anticipate that these things are going to, you know, somehow pan out wonderfully, but then they don't. And then there's no mechanism to go back and say, where have we gone wrong? What do we need to adjust? So I think there really needs to be a reflection in the process of policy making and how we do things. So if I can just have another 1 or 2 minutes, because I want to say actually what Europe should do now, and the only areas where I think Europe actually stands a chance in AI. One is industrial AI. I already spoke about the GDPR. It's very important that we don't apply the GDPR to industrial data. So we have industries in Europe, they are competitive, they sit on tons of data, they must be allowed to work with this data. Yeah, this is really, really important that we don't go there now and say, no, we're going to, all the legal uncertainty that we have around personal data, we're going to basically dump on you. You said, Pavel, the word deployment. So it's very important because we're not going to be the leaders in producing these large language models, I don't think, you know, so, but we can use the AI. So deployment in industry is where I would look to, right? And here, I think we need to particularly encourage partnerships between industry and startups. So what happened with ASML teaming up with Mistral, awesome. We want more of this, right? Because what it allows is basically in the industry to build the AI into the products from the beginning. And this is, in my opinion, is one of the key areas where Europe can lead and can also be competitive with China. Second point, energy optimization. You said I worked in energy in the last 5 years. Let me tell you, the European energy system is very inefficient. Very inefficient. So using AI to make these systems smarter is absolutely critical. Again, all of our energy companies sit on piles of data. Please let them use it to use the AI to really make these systems better functioning because right now they're incredibly inefficient, which takes me to my next point, energy efficiency. There are ways to build into the chip and into the AI model ways to become more energy efficient. Unfortunately, the leader right now seems to be DeepSeek, which is a Chinese AI company. I'm very disappointed that this didn't come out of Europe. We are a resource-poor geography. This should have been something that comes out of a European AI company, but not all is lost because, let me tell you, I circulate a lot among sort of really cutting-edge companies. There are companies today in Europe that are producing energy-efficient chips that have the software to make the whole system more efficient, more productive. So the job of the policymaker is not to sit back, but is to scout for what is the technology frontier, what is the best practice in Europe. Please do that. It's a lot of work, but it's so worth it, because only when we scout for the best, we can build them up to be first European leaders, but also global leaders. And these companies are out there. Please pay attention. The scouting needs to be built into the system. And to the extent it makes sense to have data centers in Europe, it'll be up north or in the Iberian Peninsula, basically, because only there will you have abundant and cheap clean energy. So what that means is you will have a redrawing of the industrial map of Europe that may be painful for some, beneficial for others. But again, this is the job of foresight to do this. I will wrap up now, but I want to say that when I saw this headline in the report that you sent, and quote, "The key role of AI, quantum, and cybersecurity in the global power game, can the EU remain a front runner?" I found that actually very disappointing, because the EU is not a front runner. And your job is not to tell policymakers what they want to hear, but what they need to hear, Speaking truth to power is the basic prerequisite for foresight, and it's about time we learned it, because the sovereignty we strive towards is bestowed on those who lead the technology frontier, not those who regulate it, and not those who prematurely celebrate their non-existent leadership. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Anne. And with that, I want to turn to Ajit with a simple and straightforward question. How do we implement all that in the policy framework? And you wrote about this a couple of years ago in a report called The Digital World Towards 2040. So it really matches the title of today's conference, also 2040 Ambition. And there you pointed out that AI governance challenge is all about balancing innovation and societal safety, even though I guess we can discuss whether balancing is the right word, but against the backdrop of an asymmetry of information between policymakers and industry. And I think what we can add to this is also the pace of change, right? Governance is slow, and AI developments are super dynamic. We have never seen anything remotely close to that. So how do we implement all that foresight, wisdom, which Anne just shared with us in the policy context that we have? I mean, do we need sort of a radical shift in how institutions are operating and designed, or will just mending things work?
Sure. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. So firstly, so you're correct about the report, which James Ellis, when he spoke to me, he said that he wanted to think about the AI in 2040, and he said, by the way, it should be only 20 pages, and that was a challenge. But the point is that how do you look at this long-term foresight, and which is the same question you have, is that what I decided to do was to look at markers, to look at AGI as a concept, not as a physical thing, because so many people are talking about it in too many different ways. So look at what does it mean to be if you have that concept. And we had 3 markers. The first one was language, the ability of AI to understand language, and that definitely is way, way beyond. The second one is the ability of AI to reason, and that comes through with a lot of the agentic AI and all that type of stuff, which leads to autonomy. And the third one was autonomous AI robots. Now, the most person talking about that currently is Elon Musk, for various personal reasons as well. But I think that there is a certain tendency towards that. Now, when you look at that, the other thing we looked at was look at the economic, social, and technology aspects together. Now, that's quite different from a typical technologist, and I come from Oxford, and although I'm presenting in a personal capacity, I'm very used to presenting this sort of a discussion to my group at Oxford, because we are very, very keen to get the best for students. And every 3 months or so, I go to my board and tell them that things have radically changed, and they've started to listen to me now, because it does appear in the zeitgeist that everything has changed. So how do we look at that? And this is how we decide. This is the structure we decided to do. And then we decided to look at two things. And they were motivated by various people from the EIF and others. And the first one was skills, and I'll tell you why that is important. And the second one was the impact for policymakers. And you are all here in that capacity. I am not a policymaker. I'm a more of a technologist, but I think that the value of policymaking is extremely critical, especially forward-thinking. Now, when we talk about skills, the question is, the sort of related question is, what did we miss? Correct? I mean, it's 2 years since we launched it. What did we miss? We missed the geopolitics. Nobody could have predicted the nature of the sort of the geopolitics which have emerged. We also missed how differently China would approach the situation. And I'm not talking about the supremacy. I'm talking about the engineering capability of China, and if you look at what the DeepSeek models are with that. And it bypassed some of those things. And then the previous comment from Anne, I think that we talked about Mistral, but Mistral created something called mixture of experts. And mixture of experts is used by DeepSeek, correct? So in the end, a lot of these things have sort of morphed into each other's knowledge base and worked with that. So now, you ask me what should people do, and I think it comes down to skills, and I'll tell you why. When people say skills, what do you mean by skills, correct? I mean, does it mean that you should be a carpenter, correct? Because a carpenter's job isn't going to be taken over by AI, or a hairdresser, or something like that. But I think that's too pessimistic. So the way we look at it from an Oxford point of view, and in terms of my work, in terms of reskilling, and a spin-off from Oxford, which is ADOSH, we look at essentially creating enterprise AI leaders, and leadership is not at the management, but at functional level. This is the first point. And in practical, if you break that down into three things, first of all, we look at hard skills. It's very easy to say that I do ChatGPT and I know AI, correct? And that's not what's going to pay you the bills. You need to look at hard problems, fundamentally. The second thing is, if you remember a few years ago, I've been here a few times, there was the learn to code stuff. Everybody from Obama everybody was talking. Today, we don't talk about learning to code, correct? I mean, it's not in the discussion even. Why? Because with AI, you can learn to prototype. And prototyping is a huge opportunity. Everybody with no technical skills can build something. If you look at companies like Lovable, I had dinner last night, I mentioned about a Swedish company called Lovable. Who has heard about this company? But not many people. This is interesting, correct? It's a Swedish company, a unicorn, less than a year old, and formed by 20-year-olds, I think. But it's an amazing company. Have a look at that. I mean, and this is the point. I mean, you think about, this is from Sweden, correct? So you should all be familiar with that and championing them, not someone like me who is from the UK in an ironic way. And the third point I want to say is culture. Not culture as in inclusion, which is important, but culture as in having non-technical people work with technical people. Because there is a certain amount of superior thinking which technical people have, and we should break this down. We should try and encourage people who are non-technical, non-coders to incorporate them into a culture where they are able to contribute and make a difference. I think if we do that, we don't need to worry about competition. I think we will be fine.
Super. Thanks so much, Ajit. We will come back to that as well momentarily, but I want to now go to Iraya with actually two questions, because when we were discussing energy, I thought a lot about multiverse computing and the types of solutions which you are coming up with. So if you could enlighten us briefly about what you have developed, the innovative AI compressor model, which allows to perform AI operations more energy efficiently as well, from what I understand. So how much potential do you see there? But let me smuggle my second question right away, which is about the innovation landscape in Europe, because we're all entrepreneurial on stage, but you are representing a startup which received the Future Unicorn awards in 2024, and I checked before coming. You are on your way, so fingers crossed. I think the valuation looks pretty promising. But what do you make out of this moment of truth which we are hopefully living through? What are, in your view, the promising signals and where the hurdles remain? We had just last week, I believe, the meeting of Commissioner Zaharieva with institutional investors and pension funds, preparing the launch of the Scale-Up Fund. A super interesting development by means of which deep tech development projects will be funded through an entity that will be privately managed, right? That's a very important mindset shift, one could say, especially here at the European Commission. So what do you make out of that evolution at the moment?
So yes, let me maybe introduce a little bit the company, because maybe someone didn't know before about multiverse computing. We are a deep tech company that was founded 6 years ago. Right now we are more a scale-up because we are 250 people. The headquarters are in Spain, but we have also offices around Europe and also in Canada and the USA, the last one that was open this year. But for you to know, at the beginning, we are a quantum and AI company. We start working on the quantum side. We have developed a super deep technology that we can apply for AI, and we have discovered that we can make AI more efficient, and that's our goal right now and what the company is focused right now. So we are compressing the big AI models, the LLMs, artificial vision models, for making it efficient, sustainable, and make it possible to deploy it in industrial sector, in edge devices, in small devices, also in data centers for make it more efficient. So we are working on the side of the algorithms for make it more efficient and make possible that the AI is scalable and we can apply in all the sectors that are using AI nowadays. So the point that I want to remark maybe is that in Europe, in my opinion, what we have to push and to focus is, of course, on the efficiency and the sustainability of the AI solution, because as we were mentioned, we have not the capacity for develop these big LLMs. We have not the enough capacity, the investment for developing this. For example, in the quantum side, for you to know, because we have some knowledge about that and we are in contact with different companies, the Trump administration announced some weeks ago that they will invest between $1 billion and $2 billion in its company, or in the most promises company that are working on the quantum side. So imagine, we are super proud because we have closed a round of 200 millions last summer. So we are super proud, and we are working continue working on that. But imagine if we have to compete with some company that has this investment and this support. So what we are focused right now is to, okay, we have no capacity for develop this from scratch. So we will focus on make it more efficient in a smart way. So we have the capacity, we have the talent, we have the technology for make it more efficient and deploy in a lot of sectors in an easy way. So first of all, what we need is work in a smart way, and be intelligent. Also, we need capacity, we need resources, computational resources for doing that. We need to invest at least in computational resources for make it possible. And also we need collaboration, I think, between startup, big companies, public sector, research center. We need to focus and identify where can we be the best player and go all together for make it possible.
Great, thank you so much, Iraya. Fingers crossed again. Super interesting development, much needed, and also in an area which can become a European specialization, so to say. So that's very good to hear. Can we have the results of the poll from before up on the screen, so that we could maybe exchange opinions on Slido? Yes, I think we had the voting before, didn't we? So it's coming, okay, yeah. So I will, by the way, open up for questions very soon. But maybe once, while the slide is being uploaded with the results of the Slido poll, I want to come back to this issue of adoption, deployment, and basically the impact of AI on productivity, because if there is one promise on the positive side of the equation, it's the impulse of AI on productivity, and we desperately need it in Europe especially. The OECD has done a lot of work on this, even though it's early days, right? There's not much research generally about this issue. The impact of AI on the labor market is also in an early research phase, so to say. We're beginning to see what's happening, especially with regard to young graduates, but it's early days. So when you think about recommendations for member states in that area, Jerry, what would you primarily focus upon?
All right. Well, this is something that we're trying to put together now, right? It's a set of recommendations in particular about how to promote AI adoption among small and medium-sized enterprises, because what we do find, we've looked at this from the macroeconomic view and from a very microeconomic view, if you will, and both of those do show, promising signs of productivity growth and GDP growth through adoption of AI. When we look at the micro side and look at firm level data, there is a very strong correlation between the productivity of firms that adopt AI, productivity of firms and those that adopt AI. What we're trying to tease out better, right, is the extent to which the AI, the correlation, which is the causality behind those. Because what we find is AI adopters already tend to be those companies that had invested in digital skills. They'd invested in other digital infrastructures. They have broadband connectivity. They have access to data. So these are, for us, kind of the complementary assets that governments can help put in place and policymakers can help put in place to promote widespread adoption. We've also done some work, though, looking, within countries, within regions, at some of the disparities that exist, not just in AI adoption, but looking specifically at broadband connectivity. And again, if you want to promote growth among SMEs and you want to promote growth in all regions, you want to see broadband connectivity across all of those regions. The data that we have now, looking at, again, across OECD countries and beyond, still show about a 40% gap in upload and download speeds in the same country between more urban and rural areas. Right? And this is something, again, we can look at different policy recommendations to help extend, and we've made a number of those, to extend broadband connectivity more broadly across countries to remove some of those fundamental barriers. Because honestly, if you don't have access to connectivity, your ability to scale up and move up farther up the stack, if you will, from there, becomes that much more complicated. So these are what we're looking at, as well as, there's some still issues just about awareness. Right? Thinking how can, for a small firm in particular, how do we embed AI in our company in ways that are going to improve productivity, improve our sales, improve our services, and so forth, as well as then making sure that you've got the financial assets to put into the investment that's needed. So that's kind of the policy framework that we see. Maybe we'd have to expand that as well. In thinking about the energy needs, although I think those are more surrounded around the big data centers and the compute centers, but ensuring that firms across the economy have access to those kinds of complementary assets will be important. Just the other piece on that, when we mentioned the skills, and I appreciate the comment you made about the different kinds of skills that are made. We're also finding, as we track job postings around AI, that increasingly it's not just knowing AI, but it's having AI with management skills, it's AI with leadership skills, it's other humanistic kinds of social science skills that are becoming increasingly important as we move from developing that tech stack to promoting deployment of tech across a variety of different industry sectors.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jerry. And skills came up as number one on our list of critical factors, and you started to decode what that means. But I would like to maybe take that a little bit further and ask Anne, Iraya, Ajit what they would consider as most impactful here. I'm very fond of the term hybrid intelligence, which goes in the same direction you mentioned, namely combining the skills, the technical skills, with the human, cognitive, emotional, social, creative skills, right? Now, this is a relatively new approach, so it still needs to be ready for adoption, so that it really makes a difference. But I think that's the direction of travel. But I'm curious what the others think.
Can I?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. I'll just quickly say that I think what is important is we developed a methodology at Oxford, and I think one of the key things we look at there is the ability for somebody, and we kind of worked it as a part of our spin-off from Oxford called ADOSH. So we look at the ability to form a business case. And the business case and the value proposition and the AI strategic implementation, and it's not just at one level, it goes right up to from the top to the bottom with that. And the advantage of that is it empowers non-technical people to be what we call as AI leaders, correct? Because AI leadership should not come from top down; it should come from bottom up. But it's a famous quote from Donald Rumsfeld. It's like the known unknowns. You know, he used it in the context of Iraq. But the point is valid that if you don't know what you don't know, then how do you formulate a process? And this is the problem we are trying to solve. And I think it's a big problem, and it's an empowering problem to skills.
Great.
Yeah. Apart from the deployment, which I already spoke about, I think it's really the legal framework, which is perceived as extremely punitive in Europe. And this makes companies reluctant to work with these models. So it's very important to take note that with regards to the forthcoming AI Act, that pretty much every important company in Europe has signed a letter to say, put this on hold so that we don't regulate again before we're even in the game. Yeah. So there's something here about sequencing. The second thing I will say is that I think we need, from a policy perspective, speed needs to become a criterion. We are too slow, we are too cumbersome. All of these developments take place at a breathtaking speed. We are always behind the curve, always. So it requires really a different type of policy planning, policy execution, with a degree of acceptance that we cannot control everything. I know this probably brings shudders sort of around the room, but it happens anyhow. You're not in control. You're not in control. And this is what we learned sort of from Digital 1.0, where we wanted to do it perfectly and control every risk, you know, with the result that others are now in the lead. Our companies are out of the game. So let's not do this, please. It really requires a reflection among people like this in the room that give guidance and speed and allowing for a degree of letting things just happen, allowing our companies to be in the game, even if we don't know how it will end, requires a very different type of policy making.
Yeah, thank you so much. Anne, Iraya, would you like to add on the skills issue now? I would like to open up if there are questions or comments. If not, there's lots that we still have to discuss. But if there is anyone interested in raising an issue, please let me know. Yes, please, Pascal. I'm gonna jump.
No, it should, okay. It moves, change colors. No, I want to raise the question of the public acceptability public acceptability of AI. Because, I mean, Anne, you referred to the regulatory framework, but it is also the reflection of the public acceptance or acceptability. And it raises a whole lot of questions about communication, about the positive effects, the fact that there are safeguards, or that the public authorities are there to safeguard private sphere, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, it's not an easy issue. And probably on the European side, we've erred on the side of caution too much in the past. We're trying to correct that with some omnibus proposal. There will be one next week on digital, for instance. But it's always a very different balance to strike. And we are not legislating in a vacuum.
Yeah. Can I respond to that? Because I thought very much about this. And as you know, I mean, I am not advocating that we put anyone in danger. But our thinking behind the GDPR was that basically Europeans cared hugely about data privacy. Today, we have 50 million Europeans on TikTok. So are you really seriously telling, every young person is on TikTok, are we really seriously believing that this is the overriding concern for Europeans who engage with digital technologies? This is what I meant when I said we need reality checks along the way. We don't have any social media platforms. This is why they're all either on American or Chinese. This is the unintended consequence that I am talking about. So it really needs, at least among people who do strategic foresight, the honesty to see how things are playing out. It wasn't the way we thought it was going to be. So what do we do now? And there need to be places in public policy where we can have these discussions and not tell ourselves that this is what the European citizen wanted when they're doing something completely different. I just wrote about this. You know, we think that climate change is the overriding goal, but we shipped 4.6 billion parcels from China last year to Europe. So please, you know, at the same time, we don't have a single pan-European e-commerce company. So this is what I'm saying. We do things with good intention, but they don't always pan out. And actually, most of the time, they don't pan out the way we thought they were going to. So then what do we do about this? Because the geopolitical environment is very serious. This is what I was thinking, Jerry, when you were talking about the connectivity. I can just see everyone like, okay, the Chinese do this the fastest, the cheapest, you know. We need to build in these considerations. What about the geopolitics? What about our sovereignty, agency, right? So do European citizens really believe in what we are doing? And this is very important in discussions like these, that we have the honesty to disagree with one another, to have candid talks, to look at the data, what is it telling us, and not just prematurely think we're acting in the interests of a European citizen that today is totally dependent on platforms and on digital technologies that we not only not control, but oftentimes don't even understand anymore.
May I add something?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. So I think the question of what should we do, and I think one thing specifically with AI is there's one fundamental question here, and that affects all the data centers, all the data and things like that. The question is scale alone enough, correct? And that is the underlying thing with everything. All the sort of, the bigger the network it is, the more data you need kind of stuff. But there are a bunch of technologies coming which are going the opposite direction. Most prominently, if you see 2 days ago, Jan LeCun left Meta, correct? I mean, who knows who Jan LeCun is? Very good. Again, I think you should follow him, correct? Very, very, very thoughtful person, very intelligent person, very well defined, and he had a different view of the world. And maybe some of these views are going to be valid. And maybe some of these views are going to succeed, and I hope some do, because then that would allow a different type of competitor to emerge, which does not exist today. That's just my thinking behind that.
Thank you. And Jerry?
Thank you. I was just going to come back to the question about trust, because I do think around new technology, right, AI, quantum, and others, I mean, building public trust is an essential component of that. And of course, moving in a regulatory direction can be one way of building public trust. But I think it's also important to recognize that governments have many different policy levers that they can use to build, right? I mean, some of this is about education and training and skills development. Some of it's about demonstrating the benefits. Right. So can we do things that can put and promote the application of AI in areas that are going to touch citizens in ways, of course, they need to be done in ways that are reflective of the concerns, in healthcare, in government services that they interact with, so they get some experience with them as well. And even as moving in a direction of regulation, looking at what can even be done in a voluntary mechanism. So we established something at OECD. We launched it back in February, which is a reporting framework for large developers of AI systems, basically the large developers of LLMs, to disclose publicly information about their risk management procedures. We had buy-in, we had buy-in from the policy side, because this grew out of the G7 and the Hiroshima process around AI and AI code of conduct that was developed there. But it was also, we brought the businesses into the process themselves, who saw benefit in it because this was a way that they were going to help convince their customers that they were taking steps. The other benefit is by having this information now publicly available, we've had about 20 companies that have contributed, and now we're trying to work to expand the scope and make it a little bit easier for even smaller companies as well to provide this information. It's also in an early stage of a technology development. It's also providing good practice. You can see, again, with the kinds of information that they were willing to disclose publicly, what kinds of practices they have in place. And we see this as a platform then that others can use to better understand, if we're going to develop an AI system, what can we do? So I think, completely agree, trust is something we need to build in. It's kind of foundational to work that we're doing on emerging technologies now. And I think we need to think broadly about what the instruments are that governments can use to build trust among the public. And they include regulation, but I think they include a wider set of policy instruments and programs as well.
Please,
Super fast.
Raya?
Yeah, super fast about trust. Just to say, I don't know if we trust or not in the AI, but the key point is that every day, we are using ChatGPT. So it's something that is here, so we can regulate, but we need also to invest. We need to support the companies. We need to adopt this solution. So both things, I think, that should go together, the regulation and the trust in the technology, everything. But we need also develop and deploy this kind of technology.
Another side to the acceptability question is whether or not we can develop trustworthy AI on top of the investment in gigafactories and compute at the moment, right? Because that's one thing, the compute itself, and we live in the age of infinite compute, as some call it. But then there is the question, how do you go about safety and reliability, and can this be the focus of European efforts to a larger extent, so as to build on that compute provision in the AI factories to arrive at trustworthy AI much earlier. So CERN for AI is an example of a concept which tries to address that. We have 5 minutes remaining if we can stretch things by a little bit. And I'm going to see, yes, there is one question or comment on the back, 2 questions or comments on the back. So if we could have the microphone there. Or I guess you can press your mic at the table, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Nadia Kowalczykova from the EU Institute for Security Studies. Thank you for this conversation. Today, in parallel, also the International Crisis Group is having a lot of conversations on AI and the impact of AI on conflict prevention or fueling of conflict and related matters. And I would like to come back on the regulation and accountability measures, because we are talking about how we are using AI, how we need to be using AI, because you cannot stop it, we cannot control it, we cannot control and understand social media, because they are maybe too big to fail them or too big to control. But we do have some regulation, including the Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act. We also see how they are being implemented, but we also see there is a lot more that could be done to implement it. And we, I think, are perhaps thinking of new measures or other measures, while perhaps not using enough the measures we already have to hold certain actors, businesses accountable as well. Because my question would lead here to, the number one factor we have on our Slido is the skills. But we also see increasing research that while improving our skills of using AI, we are losing other skills, analytical skills, critical thinking, policy writing, writing text ourselves, thinking for ourselves. So how do we balance out these laws that we are also facing with the increasing use of AI? How do we make sure that we implement the legislation that we have to protect our citizens and to hold the actors accountable for breaches of such legislation? And how do we address also the ecological impact of the AI when we want to use it actually also to improve our energy?
Thank you so much. So let's have the second and last question, and then I will give the floor to the panelists one last time.
Yes, thank you, Frank Arnouds from the Belgian MFA, EU Strategic Policy Unit. Thank you for this very realistic discussion, but maybe I find it a bit fatalistic as well. For this analysis that our data policy and our energy policy puts us in a very weak position to have a leadership position. This probably we have to accept that, but if I see that we came to the realization that we have to catch up with defense and defense industry policy, that there we have to go for strategic autonomy, and that we decided that we invest 5% of our GDP on defense and defense capacity. But isn't strategic autonomy and de-risking on digital services and on information technology not as important for the good functioning of our society, that we should at least make a similar investment in this strategic autonomy and in those capabilities at the European level as we do for defense and defense industry? Because it's actually, this is the whole system that makes the European body work. Should we not make at least a big effort in that than we do for defense and defense industry? Thank you.
Right, thank you so much. And strategic autonomy indeed came up as number 2 on the list also. However, one needs to also make some very wise choices with respect to what really delivers strategic autonomy and what does not. So I would like to ask the panelists to offer us some concluding remarks while answering the questions in reverse order, starting with Iraya. And please be very brief, because we have run out of time.
No, I just want to say that in the quantum and AI sector, what I think that we should focus in is building and working something in a smart way. So which one are our capacities, and work on that and focus on something that, okay, we cannot develop something, but what can we develop?
Okay, very good. Ajit?
Yes, thank you very much. So I'd like to take the question about the skills which was raised. And I think the question what we look at it is we try to think at how do you convert sort of developers to researchers. Now, it's a very specific approach to skills, but from my perspective, if you look at what is valuable in skills, this is the research type of skills with that, and AI especially when you look at the amount of money Zuckerberg was going to pay and things like that. So we are trying to build in those principles from ground up, and they're not very common, but that answers to a lot of the questions which were raised about skills is because it's the first principles thinking from critical thinking and all of that.
Wonderful. Anne?
Mine is more philosophical because we talk about acceptance. I don't think this is really the job of people who do foresight because it'll happen anyhow, and it's other people's jobs to think about the acceptance. Your job is to anticipate. And the one thing you need to anticipate is in quantum technologies that basically whoever will win this, and I go back to saying there will be winners and losers, whoever will win this will be able to basically crack encryption, even of sovereigns, right? That means you no longer will have state secrets. So if democracies don't win the quantum race, this will have very serious repercussions. And please, for those few people in the system whose job it is to think about foresight and to pay attention to global trends, don't think about acceptance, because it'll happen anyhow, whether we're in the game or not. Think about anticipation. This is the job that I think you have to do.
Excellent, thank you. And Jerry?
Okay, and try quickly. So on the strategic autonomy, I think, this has become something we are seeing across the science and technology space, across countries, across regions, and is the theme of our most recent STI Outlook. And I don't say that just to sell the Outlook as the book, but this is the big policy issue that's being wrestled with. I think what we need to do is try to understand what are the trade-offs that are involved in this, right? I have data. We've just issued some reports looking at the differences in investment in AI in the EU and the US, looking at investments in software and infrastructure and R&D. It's a factor between 2 and 3 in those different categories. So there is a cost associated with it. And that's what societies and governments need to do, is try to make those trade-offs. How much is it worth to improve strategic autonomy? Where are the critical points? Where can we rely on allies and other trading partners? And where do we need to build our own? So I think that needs to just be done from an OECD point of view, of course, in an evidence-based way. Maybe to come back quickly on the first question, and then to wrap up, because you raised a lot of key issues in there around the holding people accountable, which is one of our principles for AI, and developing trustworthy and reliable AI and so forth. I think what we're seeing is the AI discussion needs to take place across essentially in governments. All ministries are involved in this. They need some central coordination. We're doing this at OECD right now, too. We have about 17 of our different thematic committees that are working on a so-called horizontal project on how to thrive with AI. We're looking at the productivity impacts. We're looking at the competition impacts. We're looking at what it takes to do trustworthy AI in healthcare, education, government services, you name it, to try to identify how we can advance on, again, all of the principles, but also how do we get the most benefit out of AI while being aware of the downside risks and mitigating them as well. So it is and it's multi-stakeholder as well. So it really is an all of society and all of government initiative.
Great, thank you so much. I won't sum up. All I will say is that this was, as far as I can see, 100% foresight and 100% anticipation. So big thank you to all the speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to Pavel and to all our panelists. Really stimulating and food for thought. And actually, it brings us very nicely into the topic of our penultimate panel, I think. Decision-making under conditions of radical uncertainty. Why foresight matters when disruption moves faster than policy. We will have one more Slido for you while we invite our panelists up on stage. So if we can have the next Slido, please, that would be great. And I think we're almost ready to invite you again. Hi. Good afternoon. Right, so let me introduce, in fact, our panelists. Have we had the Slido up? So main challenges for using foresight over the coming years. I think some of Anne's comments provide a lot of food for thought for this question, so it moves in really well. We'll give you a minute for that. And I think we have one connection who will join us online. No, we should have two, in fact, so they will also come shortly. And as far as I'm aware, the Slido poll results will come in you'll share them with us. Okay.